Deputy Chief of Mission Hamilton said, normalization and opportunities between the U.S. and Cuba will improve at the speed of trust. I will never forget that statement. It's apparent to me there's a deep and abiding mistrust that is historically built from colonial Spanish times. One of the other impressive things that was about all our meetings was how well the Cuban people know their history. And there is definitely a deep-seated feeling of having been exploited and taken advantage of, and their sovereignty not being respected. And if we can establish people-to-people relationships, if the American people, other than Cuban Americans, can appreciate the Cuban people, what they've endured, how they've persevered graciously, creatively, and the spirit on the street is incredible. I think the American people will see and say to themselves, it's time to try something different because the embargo is not getting us to where we have opportunities for both sides of the equation. So I'm just very, very pleased. I was very melancholy that we had to leave a day early. I keep telling the mayor we ought to take credit for the storm not hitting St. Petersburg, because sure enough, if we had stayed in Havana, it would have hit St. Petersburg. It's like taking your umbrella to work and it doesn't rain, or washing your car so it will rain. I know Deputy Mayor Tomlin's going to talk about some of the cultural issues that we discussed the next day on Saturday, but I can tell you, and Councilmember Rice, thank you for being here. I think one of the very next visits that we ought to make is our ocean team ought to go there. They are very concerned about climate change, sea level rise, and how they can make their community more sustainable and protect themselves from these environmental impacts. And this is something I know that is near and dear to your heart. So I think that can be one more substantive move. But here's what we have to do. We have to create an environment of trust if anything is going to change in the relationship. And we can do that community by community. And I think the mayor has really taken a dramatic and courageous step for this community of St. Petersburg, to be a leader and to be one of the communities that takes the risk to say, we want to make our world a better place. And we can do that. We can help our citizens, and we can help the citizens of Cuba by participating as a leader in this new era of dignity and respect for one another. So thank you for allowing me to go on the trip, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. As both Mayor and Council Chair Gertz have stated, official normalization of relations will undoubtedly unfold at the highest level of government between both nations. But the sustaining social capital that is going to really drive change, cultural change, between these countries will unfold in the hearts and minds of its people. There's perhaps no better facilitator than cities to do that. Governments that organize people at the most myopic level, and perhaps no better mechanism than culture and the arts, the universal language of culture and the arts. Specifically between St. Petersburg and Havana, there were a multitude of cultural connections, I thought, that really express the humanity of the people of Cuba. Cuba is beautiful. Havana was beautiful. Its people, beautiful. Its story was poignant, and that was all laid bare in their expression through the arts. You have to understand the environment and the role that arts plays in the resilience of this city. You're literally surrounded by art. Whether it is being serenaded in a restaurant, at any meal, at any given place, or seeing it expressed on the sides of walls, much like you see here in St. Petersburg. Whether it's folk art that was passionately strong and rich and expressive, or the fine art that hung in the National Museum that rivals any art I've seen anywhere in the world. Art is a definitive element of Cuba's culture. And so the connectivity and the conduit that art can play in building a bridge between our two cultures cannot be overstated. We had a wonderful meeting with the Director of International Relations for the Cuban Ministry of Culture. His name is Alfredo Luis Roche, at the Museum of Fine Arts. Met with his entire team, and every single person we interacted with during our time in Havana was gracious. None were more gracious or enthusiastic than those who worked with the Ministry of Culture. They had a good sense of America. They understood the role of arts. I think that they were impressed and eager to understand more the role that arts plays in St. Petersburg. And so we talked very tangibly about cultural exchanges and some real opportunities to begin to tell the story of our two cities through our arts and through expression. The St. Petersburg Festival, a newly introduced partnership between the city of St. Petersburg and the Sun Coasters, is being introduced in our community to do that in our own country, celebrate all that's wonderful about the arts here in this community. We think it's a great opportunity for cultural exchange to bring over some of the art and the artists of Havana to be a part of that festival sometime in the future. It's something that we plan to work very specifically on to make happen. We have the benefit of a wonderful director of cultural affairs here at the city, Wayne Atherholt, and a great team of artists and art directors and facilitators here in St. Petersburg, who we know will be met with that same type of talent in Havana, and we believe that that's something that will come to pass sooner than later. There are wonderful opportunities, too many to name, and we look forward to building on those relationships. One assignment that we've given ourselves is to work on a memorial. Both Havana and Cuba as a country and the United States and St. Petersburg as a city share another commonality of being very civically engaged. And there is a common thread around freedom and rights. Regardless of those things, the filters by which we've learned about Cuba, there is a very specific commitment to human dignity and civil rights, so much so that there is a monument that depicts Dr. Martin Luther King prominently displayed in their city as a nod to that commitment. And it's in disrepair, as many things are in the city, and we've committed to working to do what we can. Obviously, the minimization of taxpayer dollars, but what we can through private convening and collaboration to restore that as a gift from the people of St. Petersburg and recognition of the beauty of the people of that. So that's one of the activities that I look very forward to leading, and taking back delegation that will work in a meaningful way to restore this wall where Council Chair Gertz is standing actually has the words to Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, both in English and in Spanish. And it's a revered wall that means a lot to the people there. Obviously, the sentiment means a lot to the people here. And it is through those types of connections that we are confident that we will move forward with progress for the people of Cuba.
Thank you, Dr. Tomlin. We'll take your questions in a moment, but just in closing, we see tremendous opportunities for going forward, continuing to build on the relationships that we've begun, and I'll harken back to Chair Gertz's comment about trust, and he's absolutely right. That was the one word we heard that really, I think, was the bellwether that we need to address, is building trust between our countries and building these relationships. We are very excited about the opportunities for exchanges, cultural exchanges in the arts as described by the Deputy Mayor, exchanges in knowledge technology, information, education, healthcare. We didn't get to visit the university, but when you look at their literacy rates and what they're doing in the area of healthcare and progress in new medications, I think there's incredible opportunities for exchanges there. And then lastly, we certainly are going to continue our efforts to pursue the consulate office here in St. Petersburg, and look forward to continued dialogue, conversations, and at some point in time down the road, an additional trip back out there so that we can continue to learn more and build on what we were able to experience in the 2 days that we had on this trip. So with that, we'll go ahead and we'll open it up to any questions that y'all have.
Mayor, Jeff Patterson with Channel 8, and I want to bring up a tweet that I just got from somebody as I was telling everybody that you guys had just come back. But given the legality of the embargo and the complexities of Helms-Burton, you mentioned you didn't have signed contracts, but are there tangible things that this trip or subsequent trips could bring back to the citizens of St. Petersburg in the form of actual business relationships or agreements that people can benefit from here? Because as I tweeted out that you guys were going, somebody responded, WFLHF, so you're saying they went on a taxpayer-funded vacation. So that's a two-element question. What can you bring back that's tangible? How would you respond to somebody like that?
Yeah, well, first off, it wasn't taxpayer. The taxpayers didn't pay for this trip. And we were very clear, both before we left and I think during our remarks today, we didn't go there with the belief that we were going to come home with contracts in hand and businesses that we were going to be able to start in Havana or Cuban businesses starting here in St. Petersburg. This was about fact-finding and relationship building. And as Chair Gertz said, I think it was extremely successful and productive. You have to start laying the groundwork. You have to start making those inroads and building those relationships up in order to get to a point where the other is possible. I think in the short term, I think our greatest opportunities probably lie with arts and culture and the exchanges that we can have there, in addition to exchanges between our universities and their universities, between our medical professionals and their medical professionals. And I think as normalization continues to move forward, which we hope it does, the opportunities for interactions from a business and economic standpoint will become more apparent. It would certainly be helpful to have commercial air flight as opposed to having to do charter air flights in order to get back and forth. But I think those things aren't going to happen without what a trip like we just did. And so those are the steps forward.
And Councilman Gertz, I saw you nodding your head because as an attorney you can understand the complexities of the embargo in Helms-Burton.
Yeah, there are some, as a matter of fact, the exceptions to the travel restrictions in Helms-Burton have opened up over the last few years. So there are many more exceptions now, two of which are educational. One of the restaurants we were at the very first day, there was a group of U.S. students eating together at the same restaurant, speaking New York English. And secondly, informational. So what we can do, look, Cuba has a very overeducated society. They have scientists and engineers and physicians who are car mechanics because they don't have the commercial opportunities to practice the education that they got. So the first thing to do is, through these educational and informational exceptions to the travel embargoes, is to open the channels of communication. Meet the people who are going to be making the decisions and start this informational exchange. They have done some very innovative things in medicine because they're forced to think outside of the box. They don't have the technology that exists in America and in other first world countries. So they have to do things a little bit differently. A lot of those efforts show very much promise. But in order to take the theoretical and what looks like very good ideas and turn them into reality, they need technology, they need resources, and we can start laying the path to the day that Helms-Burton is amended or repealed, which if you read the media, and I'm talking about all the media, Google Helms-Burton today, and anywhere, the common wisdom is anywhere from 3 to 5 years, Helms-Burton will no longer exist. Now that goes back to this speed of trust thing. The U.S. government is going to want to see that Cuba continues to make improvements in opening its government, transparency, freedom of speech. Gustavo Machín talked about these things. He honestly said, we're not perfect. The people are dissatisfied. We are trying to make improvements. So the U.S. government's going to be looking to see that they carry out on those words. And the Cuban government is going to be looking to see, are we making the outreach to be prepared for when the day comes? And that's what I meant when I talked about being a leader, being out there and trying to set an example for taking the risk because there's so much that can be done, and both sides will benefit greatly. So I think within the so my half an hour answer, I'm sorry, is there are 2 or 3 exceptions that clear the way for making that happen in anticipation that Helms-Burton will no longer be required.
Probably takes a physicist to keep that 50s car on the road.
Mayor, you talked about before leaving, talking with Cuban Americans in St. Petersburg about the trip. What kind of feedback have you gotten from Cuban Americans since word of the visit got out, since you've returned? Has it been positive, negative? How would you characterize it? What kind of volume?
Now, I will tell you, I have not had a chance to speak yet with our folks here that we met with beforehand. But the feedback that I've gotten, it's been fascinating, the level of interest in this trip. And I'm sure my colleagues have probably had the same thing. Phone calls, emails, text messages. How was Cuba? What was it like? Tell us about it. There is, I think, a real strong interest, certainly in this area. I can't speak for anything outside of our city, other than my friends and family who reached out to me. But of the people in this community, an interest in Cuba and what it's like, and trying to learn more to see if all of these perceptions, all this information that we've heard over the years, how accurate is it? I mean, you see that car there in this photo, and I certainly was led to believe before I went that that's all that there was there. That all the cars there are all 57 Chevys and cars of that type. And are they there? Yeah, they are. Some are in actually pretty doggone shape. But there's other vehicles there too that are newer and from Europe and from China. So it's breaking that down. But the interest level has been very high.
Any criticism?
No, I have not had one person that has contacted me and said, "Why did you go? You should not have gone. That was a terrible decision you made."
Well, one.
Mayor Kriseman, you and Mayor Buckhorn have 2 different strategies, I guess, here when it comes to getting the consulate to the Tampa Bay area. Who's doing it right?
Well, we, as I've said for a long time, since I became mayor, I think we have a great region. And the Tampa Bay area is strongest when it works together, when all the communities are working together. But we also have things that set us apart from each other that are to be celebrated. And Tampa's a great city. I think Mayor Buckhorn's doing a great job governing Tampa. I'm trying to do the best job that I can for the residents of the city of St. Petersburg and what I think is in the best interest of the residents of the city of St. Petersburg. I think for our residents here in St. Petersburg, having a Cuban consulate would be a very good thing for us. We think of ourselves as an international city. All this does is further that impression not only here but internationally. So You know, I can't speak to decisions that are being made by others. All I can talk about is why it's important